Hello, everyone, and welcome to How Highland RPA Elevates Your Work Life. My name is Jeremy Hedinger. I'm a sales engineer at Navient, and today we are going to be discussing Highland Robotic Process Automation, or as it's more commonly referred to as Highland RPA. On this slide is my contact information. If you have any questions that aren't answered in today's discussion, please feel free to reach out, and I will do my best to answer as quickly and as thoroughly as I can. So what exactly is Highland RPA, and how does it differentiate itself from other RPA products? Well, to start, it's a low to no code software, so no programming knowledge is needed to actually develop the bots. It is a technology for developing software robots to automate business processes. So any manual, repeatable process that you have in any application, as long as it's on a Windows desktop, RPA can help automate that. The formal definition for Highland RPA is that it accelerates digital processes by automating manual and repetitive tasks, freeing knowledge workers to spend time on activities most valuable to the organization. Through a robust suite of robotic process automation products, which we'll cover here in a couple minutes, it covers all phases of automation from process analysis to bot management. Digitizing manual processes will increase productivity, improve the user experience, and simplify system integration, resulting in streamlined business processes and reduced organizational costs. So how does Highland RPA kind of differentiate itself from other RPA products that are out on the market? I personally have used a couple of them, and in my opinion, Highland RPA is the easiest to use. So a bot that would take me 8 hours in one of the other RPA products might take me 4 hours to create in Highland RPA. Another really good benefit of using Highland RPA compared to the other products is that because it's a Highland product, it has hooks into other Highland products, such as OnBase. So if you want to trigger a bot from a workflow task, you can do that. If you want to perform some configuration steps, which we'll discuss here in a couple minutes, you can do that as well. So what are the benefits of using Highland RPA? First and foremost, easiest one, it eliminates user clicks and keystrokes. So because we're simulating human activities to execute manual tasks, we're eliminating the need to click those buttons, keystrokes, indexing, anything like that. It performs work more accurately. So instead of having somebody manual indexing and potentially mistyping something, we know that the bot is going to do it 100% correct every single time. The next two here, they kind of go hand in hand. It reduces the need for employees to navigate multiple systems to complete their work, and it simplifies the integration between business applications when systems are inaccessible to traditional integration tools. So if you've worked with OnBase long enough, you know that sometimes integrations get clunky, they don't work super well. Highland RPA is a good way to kind of bridge that gap. It's visually configured for faster implementation and less maintenance of the solution over time. This is kind of what I was getting at when I said it's a little bit easier to use. It's a drag and drop configuration tool. You don't need to know programming in order to create the bots. And then this last one, it improves visibility over manual tasks. So there's a monitoring application that we'll discuss here in a couple minutes that improves the efficiency because you can see where your process is maybe failing. Maybe it's taking longer than you would expect to complete the bot. This just gives you that visibility into that so you can see real time what's working and what isn't working. So the Highland RPA design, so this is that suite of products that make up Highland RPA, the design here. So the first one is the analyst. This allows you to map processes and automatically produce documentation. I've actually used this to just produce documentation, but another really great feature of it is that you can take that process that you've mapped and import it right into your designer to build your bots faster because you already have a framework for it. The designer, this is where your developers of the bots will live. This is used to build the bots, implement the bots, and make changes to the bots. The conductor, this is what is actually running the automations. It's a service that is just active on a machine, and it will queue up bots in a kind of a first in, first out fashion, run the bots, execute the tasks, and then close the bots when they're done. An important note on the conductor is that you only need one license to run as many bots as it possibly can. Now, the only reason you would need two conductor licenses is if you have certain bots that need to be run simultaneously. Otherwise, it will just queue up the bots and run them one by one. And then the manager application, this is what monitors your processes and boosts the visibility, as we discussed in the last slide. So here's a screenshot of the analyst. This is an easy to use application that automatically documents your process steps. The identified interactions are converted into editable process flows and enable a seamless process understanding. So what does that mean? Basically, what this application allows you to do is it kind of works like a recording where you can start up your recording and work your way through your process. And what the analyst will do is it will document each one of those steps, whether it's a single click, double click, right click, text input, anything like that. It records it, takes a screenshot of the screen that you performed the click on, and then when you stop, it actually creates a documentation for you to then be used in the next step, which is the designer. This is a very underrated tool. This is awesome. This is actually one of my favorite things about Hyland RPA is this analyst tool, because it allows you to, instead of working from a blank slate when you're getting into the design step, you can import this framework and you already have something to work with. So it tries to create the bot for you. Now, there's obviously some tweaking that needs to happen, but it enables you to make bots a lot faster than if you didn't have this tool and you had to start from scratch every time. The Hyland RPA Designer, this is, like I said before, this is where your developers will live when they're creating the bots. It's a very easy to use, drag and drop, low-code interface. And like I said before, you can use that analyst tool to import your process documentation, and it will create kind of a framework. And this allows you to just make some fine tuning, work through it, rather than starting from scratch with a blank page. You have that framework that allows you to then quickly work through creating a bot. So maybe something that would typically take you from scratch 4 hours to build. Now you're looking at maybe cutting that time in half to create a bot. You can see here in my screenshots on the left-hand side, it kind of works like workview configuration, if anybody's familiar with that. There's a list of activities that you can drag and drop into your workflow. The execution log and output has kind of a Visual Studio feel. And then on the right-hand side is the properties that you can then work with for each activity. The Hyland RPA Manager, this is the web manager. So the biggest thing with this is that you can use this anywhere. So even if you have a bot running on a server somewhere, you can pull this up from your personal desktop and see in real time what processes are working, what's finished, what hasn't finished. So you can see here on my screenshot here, I have finished, failed, stopped on the right. But this just gives you a very quick view on what bots are running, even how efficient they are, how successful they are, and so forth. But you can also manage the bots from here. So a big thing that you can do here is that you can change variables from here that work within your processes at the same time without having to modify each bot individually. So if you have a login username password, so maybe you're going out to a website and you're scraping it, but you need to log into that website, and you've designed your bot to have that username and password plugged in, you can go to the manager and update that. If that password changed for any reason, instead of having to go hit every individual bot that might be using that login, you can just update it from here. And now all of the bots recognize that they need to use that new login. My personal favorite part of using the manager is the ability to, so like I said before, the conductor can run bots in kind of a first in, first out format where it just queues up each bot going forward. Well, sometimes we have bots that are more important than others. The RPA Manager allows you to prioritize what bots should be run first. So if there was an event where 2 bots were triggered at the same time, you can tell the conductor through the manager, hey, this bot here is way more important than this bot here. So the conductor will know, oh, okay, manager tells me that I need to run this bot first. So it will always run this bot first before this one. So instead of first in, first out, it now has a priority system. And you can set all of that up through the manager. So now we get to the fun part. This is the use cases that I came up with. All of the use cases that I'm going to go over today are use cases that I've actually built myself, just because it'll be easier for us to discuss. But the biggest thing to keep in mind is that literally any manual, repeatable process on a Windows machine can be leveraged with Hyland RPA to automate that process, or at least help automate that process. So the first one we're going to discuss is object creation. And I kept this as vague as possible because it hits so many different things. Object creation is one of the biggest things that you can use Hyland RPA for. You can also build inside a bot that works inside of OnBase. So I have it right here, whether inside of an OnBase WorkView application or in a different application entirely. This is one of the points that I wanted to touch on. Hyland RPA works completely independent of OnBase. So even if you have a manual repeatable process that's maybe in your ERP and it never touches a OnBase business process, it doesn't matter. You can use Hyland RPA to automate that process. And we'll go through a couple examples of that. So this first one, vendor creation in an ERP. Say you are in an AP invoice process and an invoice comes in and it recognizes that this vendor's missing. You might have in OnBase a vendor onboarding process. It goes through that whole vendor onboarding process. We get to the very end of the process and we're ready to approve the vendor and have them created. Instead of a user having to go in and do double entry in two systems, so they enter the vendor in OnBase and now they're ready to enter it in the ERP, instead of having to do that, we can set up a bot that does the ERP portion for us. So say in your OnBase workflow, you go through and you click the approve button on the vendor, it triggers a bot to activate, and it just goes out in the background and creates that vendor in your ERP automatically without having to double entry or potentially misinput your new vendor. Contact creation in a CRM. This is a really good one because you can leverage Excel files with RPA. So say you had held an event and you have a list of contacts in an Excel sheet. Maybe the columns are first name, last name, phone number, email, title, and we need to enter that into a CRM. Instead of somebody having to go row by row, enter each one, maybe there's 20 clicks in this whole process because you have to go open your CRM, go to create new contact, enter the new contact, close that one, create new contact, enter another one. You can have a bot just run through row by row of this Excel sheet. So even if you have 100 contacts from an event, you're saving a ton of time because a bot can just do that process rather than somebody having to go in and enter each row individually. And then this last one, this is one that I've actually built. It's a batch import of WorkView objects. So I phrased it that way because we had a process that once a month we would receive an Excel sheet. The OnBase administrators would receive an Excel sheet that was basically our on-hand inventory for retail locations around the world. And we had a WorkView application that our sales reps would look at to see what items have been selling, what haven't been selling. Maybe we need to reposition the items in the store to make it more visible, make it more enticing to purchase. This gave them insight to what's selling and what's not. So we would get this file once a month of all of the on-hand inventory for all retail locations. And every time we received this file, we forgot how to import it. We forgot the steps to perform this task. It was the same every time, but because it was once a month, a different admin was responsible for it every month. So what we did was we made a bot do it. So we took this Excel file, which had a lot of different formulas in it, and the OnBase WorkView import doesn't work with formulas. So we had to format this Excel sheet, and we did it in the same way every time. So and it was a lot. You'd copy a whole column out, into a new tab. You'd paste it back in as values only. So you'd remove the formula. You would format the dates. So instead of long dates, we changed it to short date because that's what our WorkView application was using. You'd go in and you'd delete all of the existing WorkView data and then perform an import once that Excel file was formatted. So instead of us having to try to remember how to do this every single month, and it would take away from our work because we were 3 OnBase admins trying to work on projects all at once. We were all doing different projects. So when this came in, it was like, oh, there goes my whole day because I don't remember how to do it. Got to remember how to do it, make sure it's done correctly because it's a lot of data that needs to be input correctly. And then at that point, wasted a day trying to remember how to do this, where with the bot, we had it set up where if this Excel sheet hit a certain folder, it would trigger the bot. So we didn't even have to monitor it. We just told the person that was sending us the Excel file to send it to that folder. And then we didn't even have to touch this anymore. We just checked it periodically to make sure it was still running. Now we did set it up to, and this, I would recommend this when you're making bots that work with OnBase, is have a special RPA login created for OnBase. So that way, when you're looking at your audit log and your history of your objects or your documents, you can see that RPA touched those. And that's purely from an auditing standpoint, just so that you have that that history and you're not using the manager user to do that, because then it gets confusing. Because if you're an OnBase admin that uses the manager profile and it shows that you did something, you look at it and you're like, I didn't touch this. Well, the RPA bot might have used the manager account if that's how you set it up. So highly recommend just making an RPA account in your OnBase system if you're going to leverage RPA with existing OnBase processes. Customer order processing. So this next one, a lot of companies use e-commerce websites to place orders. And this was something that we were using where basically the process was order would be placed, we'd receive an email, somebody would take that email and enter it into the dispatch system so that UPS ships it out. And this process, this is actually a really interesting use case because we were using this, we actually had an OnBase process that was already automating this step to a degree, but it wasn't enough. And there were so many breakpoints in our OnBase process that it just wasn't a good fit. So we switched to using our RPA and removed a lot of those steps. So the OnBase process was, we'd receive the email and Mailbox Importer would take the email and import it into a OnBase workflow. The OnBase workflow would take the metadata from the email and put it into a Unity form, new document type, Unity form. Then it would take the Unity form and a script would run that connected to the dispatch system and would try to create, it didn't even create the dispatch, it just created something that told the person creating the entry in the dispatch system that something needed to be done. So this was actually taking, I believe we had 2 people that were monitoring this e-commerce process. So they would get the email, these two users would get the email and they would basically follow the process all the way through OnBase. And then it would fail a lot, it broke a lot because that script wasn't super stable, I guess you would say. And they would manually enter the majority of these orders into the dispatch system. So I think they said 20 hours each. So once we made RPA automate this process, we basically saved the company 40 hours of work a week, manual, repeatable work, tedious work. And those 2 users were so valuable to the company that they were now able to do the things that they wanted to do rather than having to babysit this dispatch process. But using RPA, we removed all of the OnBase process from it entirely. And all we did was we had RPA monitor the email. And Hyland RPA can monitor more email protocols than some of the other RPA products that I've used. So that was a big win for Hyland RPA. The IMAP in particular, this was what we had to use for this. We monitored the email, we scraped the email using Highland RPA, and then we just took the information that we scraped right over to the dispatch system. So instead of potential breakpoint at mailbox import, potential breakpoint at creating the Unity form, potential breakpoint at the script, we just have the transition from the email to the dispatch system. Worked great. It improved the customer experience just from the standpoint of they were no longer waiting for a human to enter this information. You know, sometimes those users that were monitoring this process didn't have time to enter it. So a process that came in at like 4 p.m. on a Friday, instead of that order being placed Monday morning, now, yeah, it gets placed Friday at 4:05 even, because RPA was monitoring that inbox and didn't have to wait for someone to input into the dispatch system. It eliminated that manual entry time. Like I said, it saved, I think, the company 40 hours worth of work between two people. Improves data control, and it reduces costs. This next one's a fun one. So document retrieval. So Highland RPA can be leveraged to retrieve documents from other systems. And I put and import them into OnBase automatically. They don't have to go to OnBase. This particular example does go to OnBase. So this is especially useful for retrieving and importing non-PO utility invoices from the vendor's website. So this is another one we built. And this one kind of comes with a caveat. Because we were so large, I think we had almost 300 locations worldwide. And each of those locations, depending on geographic location, had a different utility vendor for electric and what have you. So we had this one user that her sole responsibility was to go out and download invoices from the utility vendors' websites. And I remember when this project came to me, this poor lady brought me this disgusting Excel file that just tracked every single utility vendor, when their invoices would likely be posted, and all of the login information for all of those websites was all in this Excel file. And she would work through this Excel file every month and just pull invoices on the days that it would happen. So this one's kind of twofold. We actually took that Excel file and we built a WorkView application, because we had so many utility vendors that we didn't want the bot to just run through every single one every day. So we built a WorkView application with a search filter on post date, so the date that it's likely to be posted. And we would have the bot log into OnBase, go to that WorkView application, and perform a search by post date by today's date. So it would search, so say today's July 19th, we would search for the 19th of the month, and it would pull up, let's say it pulled up 10 out of our 50 plus utility vendors. So we know, okay, on the 19th, 10 of these vendors are posting their invoices. So then Highland RPA would open each individual WorkView object through in the list, and it would loop through them, and it would pull the username and password and the URL for that website. It would then go out to a browser, use that URL, log into the website, and download the invoice to a DIP folder that we had on our shared drive. This saved so much money for the company. It was a great use case. This is one of my favorite use cases, but it does come with a caveat. So the advantages: eliminates late fees. This was huge. We had so many late fees all the time because it was easy to miss using that really gross Excel sheet where, you know, oh yeah, I grabbed that one. Oh shoot, I didn't actually grab that one. Where we had this system set up where once it imported, it flagged. So Highland RPA would go out to the system, and if it successfully downloaded the invoice to the DIP folder, it would go back to the RPA, or not the RPA, the utility vendor application, and it would say invoice received, yes, and it would mark it as yes. So then on the first of every month, we had a process that would change them all back to no. So This really allowed us to quickly see, yes, it successfully retrieved that invoice. And she would still monitor it, where she would go in every day and check that post date, but she would check it after the bots had run and see, did it successfully go, yes or no? And then she would manually go grab whichever ones, maybe out of the 10, maybe one didn't work. So she would go and grab that one herself. It eliminates manual entry time. The amount of time she spent trying to find these invoices and download them and index them, this just removed all of that for her. And it reduces costs. I mean, this saved so much time just from an hour's perspective that it really saved the company time and money. The caveat, the OnBase administrators really had to babysit this process. So because we had so many utility vendors, anytime a utility vendor overhauled their website, changed our login, made even a minor change to the website, but they moved where you're downloading the invoice from, any change like that breaks the bot. So we had to go in and rework the bots, massage the bots all the time. If you don't have that many utility vendors, this is a great use case. If you get north of that 50, like I said, we had like 300 locations. It was massive. It was crazy. That's when the use case kind of becomes, it still worked great, but we had to manage it every single month. I think every month we had it turned on. We had one or two vendor websites that we needed to go in and fix the bot for. So just something to keep in mind. It's just because it can do it doesn't mean it should do it necessarily. Great use case. It's one of my favorite use cases for Highland RPA, but it needs to be confined into, maybe 10 or less vendors to really get that full value, where you don't need somebody constantly checking it to make sure it worked. All right. The last use case that I wanted to discuss is OnBase configuration. So like I said earlier, one of the big benefits of Highland RPA compared to other RPA products is that there's hooks to OnBase because it's a Highland product. So we have that hook where we can actually execute bots right from OnBase workflow, which is awesome. I love using it for that. But then you also have OnBase configuration. So creating keywords and document types can be super tedious and repetitive, and it can cause quality problems because of, I put copy paste errors in here, but when I was working with 3 other OnBase administrators, we all had our own naming conventions for document types, naming conventions for keywords. Maybe we had our own best practices for keywords, where I would put this one as alphanumeric 50 every time, where somebody else would maybe say that's not alphanumeric, it needs to be integer. Instead of running into that constantly, we actually created a process that allowed us to use, Highland has these special Excel files that can manage your keywords and document type data. So this Excel list, you put in all your keyword data, all your document type data. They're 2 different Excel files. The bot then takes that and puts it into OnBase configuration. And then it marks the Excel lines green every time it succeeds in creating the new keyword or document type, or it marks it red so that shoot, I need to update that one. Just a really nice tool. Our process was actually, we took that Excel template. So I would go to a discovery of a department. So let's say accounts payable wanted to put a new process in place, and they had new keyword types and document types that needed to be added. So during that discovery, I'd be filling out this Excel file of what document types we need, what keywords we need. And because we had 3 different OnBase administrators with different naming conventions, we actually set up a quality assurance workflow for ourselves, where once I did that discovery, I would send the Excel file into a QA queue where either my manager or one of my coworkers would review it and make sure that all of our naming conventions are the same. They would approve it. Once they'd click that approve, again, with a Highland RPA hook to OnBase, we would trigger that bot to then go out and create our keywords and document types automatically in OnBase without us having to do it. Now, this is another one where it's once you reach a certain volume, it's useful if you're only, say you're going in and you're creating 5 document types and maybe 10 keywords, maybe not as useful. But if you have a huge process where you're creating 20 plus documents and 100 keywords, this really minimizes the need to do that. And it reduces that naming convention issue that I mentioned. So really good use case. It really leverages that hooks right into OnBase using Highland RPA as opposed to the other RPA products. So that's why I wanted to mention this one here. And that concludes our discussion on Highland RPA. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. Thank you everyone for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.